Sometimes we find that life is going well. Everything is going as it should. As we go throughout our days, we feel like God is sort of shining on us and all of the things are lining up. Everything seems to be in order and things are progressing well. But then there are other days when it seems that we can't get out from under the storm clouds that are over us. Feels like nothing goes our way, nothing's going right. Our hearts are mourning and are grieving, perhaps because of loss or separation or anxiety or any sorts of things that can cause this feeling of oppressive darkness around us. And it seems that these words of the Father to the Son are intended for some of these dark and stormy days. There are some days, he seems to say to his Son, when you'll feel good, when things will be going well, and perhaps it won't be so hard for you to turn away from temptation. But then there will be other days when you'll find that your willpower is at its lowest and your resistance is at its absolute weakest. And in those moments, you need to hear these words. These are words, I think, for our dark and stormy days as well. The Father in Proverbs chapter 6, verses 20 to 35, provides another lesson for his Son. I think his message to his Son here is to choose companions carefully. The Son is going to have a lot of choices as he goes throughout his life. What will he choose as his companions? Who will he choose to accompany him along the road? And so as we go along this road, as we travel this potential path that the Father is leading us down here, we meet a few more characters. One character that we meet, although in a little bit of a different form than we did in the last lesson, is the married woman. We also meet, as we continue on, her husband, who, if you have sexual relationships with his wife, he becomes the burned husband. And so I think these words here are intended to help us on these dark and stormy days, on those times when we find it difficult to resist temptation. The Father reminds the Son of how good his words really are. Here's what he says in verse 20. My son, keep your father's command and don't reject your mother's teaching. Always bind them to your heart. Tie them around your neck. He's reminding his son how important it is that he clings to these words, that he wears them around with him all of the time. And why? Why is it good to have them around? Well, verse 22, when you walk here and there, they will guide you. When you lie down, they will watch over you. When you wake up, they will talk to you. For a command is a lamp, teaching is a light, and corrective discipline is the way to life. These are good words for us to hear. That in many ways, if we begin to take these words and internalize them, if we wear them on us, if we always are reminding ourselves of these words, then they will begin to do things for us. Notice, the Son takes an active role at the beginning, right? Binding them, tying them. But then, once he does that active work, it kind of enters into a passive nature to what these things then end up doing in return. You bind them, you tie them, and then you'll find that they are guiding you. They are watching you. They are talking to you. You do these things, and they will respond in these ways. In other words, if we will set ourselves up well for success, if we will begin to build in healthy rhythms and regular patterns of listening to the wise words of the Lord, the wise words of wisdom, then we'll find that these things stay with us. And even on those dark and stormy days, when we find ourselves at our lowest, we'll find that these words are still with us. They're constant guardians. They're constant companions on the way. In fact, verse 24, they will protect you from an evil woman, from the flattering tongue of a wayward woman. This woman is bad, it seems, and it is possible that the word bad there could be translated as neighbor. The letters for the word bad and the letters for the word neighbor in Hebrew are the same. It's actually kind of a strange reality, but this happens in English too from time to time. And so it's a little bit ambiguous. Are we talking about a neighbor woman or are we talking about a bad woman? I think the reality is this is someone within our community, someone that we encounter on a regular basis, and she is married to somebody else. So whether it's bad or evil or neighbor, I think doesn't make much of a difference because she's another woman in the community who's taken, and she is out to take us off the path. And so, verse 25, don't lust in your heart for her beauty, or let her captivate you with her eyelashes. Don't desire her so that she ends up taking you. You know, when two people choose to get married, it's often because they are in love, because they have decided that they want to spend the rest of their lives in this committed relationship with one another. And I think it would be pretty strange for someone on their wedding day to begin standing up in front of all of those people as perhaps the minister is saying the words of their commitment to one another. I think it would be very strange for someone to stand up there in front of all of those people and begin looking out and wondering, I wonder who out there I could sleep with. I wonder what I could do to cheat on my spouse in the days or the weeks or the years to come. The reality is when we enter into our relationship with somebody, we are ready to commit to them. We want to have a commitment. We want to enter into a lifelong commitment with them. But that commitment may not always be at the first part of our minds or the forefront of our thinking. In fact, as life happens, as difficult things come, that's when we begin to wonder, I wonder if I could do this, or I wonder if I could do that. And what the Father is trying to do is say, I want you to stay away from that path altogether. Don't lust in your heart for her beauty. Before you even start down that path of desire, don't do it. Don't go there. He's trying to nip this desire in the bud right there at the beginning. Verse 26, for a prostitute's fee is only a loaf of bread, but the wife of another man goes after a precious life. A prostitute's fee, it seems the Father is saying, is at least partially advertised, right? The prostitute makes it very clear this is how much it's going to cost. Now, there are all sorts of hidden costs as well, right? The spiritual, the emotional trauma that might come from a night with a prostitute, but at least there's a cost that's upfront. Not so with a married woman. All of it is hidden, right? Perhaps you just see the benefit of it in the moment, but he says, no, the wife of another man goes after a precious life. She hunts down life, it seems. And so the Father in verses 27 and 28 then give us he gives us two scenarios of implausible things, implausible realities, right? Can a man embrace fire and his clothes not be burned? Is that a likely scenario? Could someone walk up to a roaring campfire and just embrace it and not find that he's burned? It would be very, very unlikely. If someone embraces fire, they will typically find that their clothes are in fact burned. Or how about verse 28? Can a man walk on burning coals without scorching his feet? Hard to imagine that you could let that campfire burn down until it's just the coals left, and then take your shoes off, take off your socks, and just walk across them. It's unlikely that you would be able to do that without burning your feet. And it's so it seems that the Father is telling the Son here, if you choose to go down this path, if you choose to listen to the wayward woman, this woman who perhaps would like to drag you off the path, if you do that, you'll find that it's a very negative end for you, right? And I think this is a little bit like giving a toddler a box of matches or giving a toddler a lighter and saying, I want you to light this candle. Is it possible that the toddler could do it? I suppose there's a possibility, but really disaster is what is waiting. And so verse 27, we move from close contact to direct contact in verse 28. Regardless, there's no way out. This is a very dangerous path to go down. Verse 29, so it is with the one who sleeps with another man's wife. No one who touches her will go unpunished. We frequently, in our culture, it seems, want pleasure without consequence. I'm not sure that's anything new. I think lots of people throughout all of history have wanted pleasure without consequence. But it seems in our day and age, we've sort of increased the access to pleasure. We've increased the availability of pleasure. And it's now something that we advertise, right? We advertise on TV, on the internet, in books, in magazines, and different things that we see online. We see the invitation of pleasure. Rarely is that accompanied by the consequence, what exactly you're getting when you take that pleasure. But the Father is trying to remind the Son here, yes, there is a place for pleasure. We remember the last lesson when he talked about enjoying your own wife. But he says, this pleasure is not without consequence. No, this pleasure will cost you greatly. No one who touches her will go unpunished. People don't despise, he says in verse 30, the thief if he steals to satisfy himself when he is hungry. Still, if caught, he must pay 7 times as much. He must give up all the wealth in his house. I think this is an argument from the lesser to the greater. He says, listen, people may look at a thief who steals a piece of bread, a loaf of bread, just in order that he might be able to live, that he might be able to survive. Perhaps they would look at that and think, that makes sense. We can understand why the thief would do that. We can have compassion on the thief for that. But still, that thief is going to have to pay for what he's done. If he is caught, he's going to have to surrender the cost of perhaps the loaf of bread, perhaps even more. In fact, he says he must give up all the wealth in his house. It still costs the thief greatly, even though his crime is understandable. It seems then the idea here is how much more then when someone steals another man's wife? Will he lose everything? Not just a little. He will lose everything. He goes on in verse 32. The one who commits adultery lacks sense. Whoever does so destroys himself. This is an act of self-destruction. Verse 33. He will get a beating and dishonor, and his disgrace will never be removed. There could be forgiveness. There may be forgiveness that awaits those who engage in adultery and then turn around and seek forgiveness from the Lord. Forgiveness is possible, but that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about the consequences, the real life consequences of our choices. And the Father is trying to tell the Son, you just need to be aware that there are consequences that await you if this is the choice you make. Verse 34, for jealousy enrages a husband, and he will show no mercy when he takes revenge. He will not be appeased by anything or be persuaded by lavish bribes. Here, we've now encountered the burned husband. We've sort of understood hints of this in the verses before, but now here we meet him explicitly. The husband is married to this woman who you have cheated with. And now, because you have done this act, you have done this thing, the husband is now out for you. He's interested in destroying your life, much like you have destroyed his. So, since he is burned, he will try to burn you. The Father is warning his Son here. Stay away from temptation. He knows that the Son is going to encounter moments when he might consider this as an option. And so he warns him, don't even head down that path. Remember his warning to the Son several verses earlier in verse 25. Don't lust after her in your heart. So often we find ourselves stuck in the throes of temptation and find it so hard to resist. The Father says, don't let yourself get there. Don't go by the door of this woman's house. No, you just stay away. You guard yourself to keep far away from her altogether. Don't even let lust have a hold on your heart. Don't entertain the thoughts. Don't go down the road of what could be. You just stay away. And if you do, you'll find yourself steering clear of all sorts of pain. I think there's some words here for us, some hard words that we need to hear. Men, stay away from other men's wives. Stay away from women that you have not entered into the covenant of marriage with. They are not yours to take. They are not objects for you to steal. No, you stay away from other people's wives. Women, stay away from other people's husbands. You leave them alone. You do not go after them. They are not objects for you to take or manipulate in any way. You stay away. These are hard words for us, and perhaps it feels a little bit harsh, but the Father, remember, is so concerned that his Son stay on the straight path. He's so concerned that his Son live a full and good and successful life. And sometimes that means looking at a situation and just calling it like it is. And as the Father looks at what his Son will face, he knows that this is what could happen. Perhaps this rings true for us or brings home even more when we pause and recognize who it is that's giving us this instruction. It seems that it's Solomon. And if we remember the story of Solomon's own parents, David and Bathsheba, we can realize, I think Solomon knew just what was at stake in all of this. If you remember the story, David had several wives. And at the time when men go off to war, when battles were taking place, David stays home in Jerusalem. He takes a nap in the afternoon, it seems, gets up, walks around the palace roof in the evening, and then he looks and sees Bathsheba. She's bathing. He desires her. He wants her. And he just decides in the moment to take her. He takes her into his palace. He sleeps with her. He sends her back home. And then at this point, she gets pregnant. She sends word, hey, I'm pregnant. And David now has a serious problem to fix. His solution is to bring her husband Uriah home. And of course, he won't go back home. He won't sleep with his wife. And so it creates this dilemma of David. What David ends up doing is sending Uriah back to the front lines so that he might be killed. And once he's killed, he brings Bathsheba home and takes him into his own household. It's a terrible story of the way that David usurped his authority and power in order to exploit a situation. He was driven, it seems, by his sexual desire, and that ends up eclipsing his legacy. In fact, if you're tracking along the story of Samuel, you see that David sort of has this rise to power, and then we reach the story of David and Bathsheba. And from this point forward, it's all about the downfall of David's kingdom. He makes this decision with Bathsheba. He takes another man's wife, and the result is terrible for both David and the kingdom. Not to mention Bathsheba. Bathsheba loses everything, right? She loses her husband in death. Her son is born and he ends up dying. She loses so much in the process simply because another man chose to take her. And so we hear these words of Solomon here and we take them to heart. We recognize that there is a warning here for us. We watch the example of what happened to other people, and we realize the same thing could happen to us. And so, let us internalize the words of the Father. Let them walk with us and guard us and talk with us regularly. May we choose companions carefully.